At our module of the week, let's bring in Martin Anderson-Klutz, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of modules of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, John. I thought this week we would change things up a little and actually talk about a theme as our project of the week. So we're going to talk about Gesso, which is a Sass-based, Webpack-based, and Storybook integrated accessible starter theme. It was originally created in July of 2014, and the versions that are currently available are 4.75 and 5.14, and we'll talk about the differences a little bit later. Now, it is actively maintained in the 5.x branch, although technically it's not Drupal 10 compatible yet. And there are currently just 2 open issues, both of which are about Drupal 10 compatibility. Now, in terms of usage stats, on Drupal.org, it officially shows as 108, but I have a feeling that's underrepresented. And again, we'll get into the reasons for that a little bit later on as well. The project page lists 3 maintainers, all of whom work for the Forum 1 digital agency. And getting into sort of how the theme actually works, I thought it would be interesting to discuss because as a theme, it really tries to sort of bake in a variety of best practices. So, SMACs and BEM class naming, a variety of different sort of code linting strategies, even within your CSS. My personal experience with it came about a few years ago when I used it on a personal project. And it was actually the first time I had actively worked with Pattern Lab. And the experience left me really impressed at how that really sort of separated out kind of the visual language in terms of, like branding and formatting, fonts and colors and those kinds of things from the actual sort of website markup, so that it wasn't really tied to Drupal. And you could see where that would add a lot of value if a customer had maybe a mixture of like Drupal and WordPress sites, or maybe even other platforms, to have kind of the visual language as something that could be more portable across different platforms. Now, in that spirit, the 5.x branch of Gesso has dropped Pattern Lab in favor of Storybook. And the theme also includes a helper module that provides some additional twig functions and a field formatter for easier integration between the Storybook UI components and Drupal. Now, there is also a version of Gesso that implements the US web design system, which was created to facilitate the US federal government in creating accessible and mobile-friendly websites. And also worth noting that there is also a version of Gesso available for WordPress as well. The other thing that I think is worth noting is that because it's intended to be used as a starter theme, so instead of kind of, the older sub-theming approach, the idea is that you put the theme folder into your project and either rename the Gesso directory or copy its contents into a folder named for your site. And that's kind of why I think that the reporting on it may be underrepresented, because really a lot of sites using it, it wouldn't actually show up as Gesso anymore, right? It would show up as sort of that renamed project. Also worth noting that the helper module also includes a Drush command for you to kind of spin up that custom theme implementation as well in an easier way, kind of more automated. So that's sort of a quick rundown on the Gesso theme. Does anybody have any thoughts about it?
I have a question. So, have you seen any indications that this could be used with kind of like a headless front end? And what I mean by that is like, I'm assuming the Storybook integration is expecting to pull in Twig templates as opposed to like maybe a React component or some other type of component.
So my first impression would be that it's probably not designed for that use case, but potentially it could be. I think that might be an interesting issue to open up on the actual project. I would say in my own experience, anytime I've had questions and posted them in their issue queue, they've gotten quick responses and been dealt with in a pretty timely manner, which is always excellent as well.
Yeah. And to be clear, Storybook does support React if you want to do React. I think you typically choose one type of component to be working with, but it can do Twig, React, native web components. There's a few other, I think Angular. I've not heard of Gesso before, so I'm pretty excited to see, another kind of base theme, starter kit theme starting to use use a combination of Storybook and all that stuff. I'm curious if they're going to start going the route that Stable and Core is doing, where you can kind of generate a theme rather than copying it. So there's like a core script you can run, and it will kind of like do the copying and renaming and all that stuff for you. So I really hope that paradigm takes off, because it makes it so much easier to start. You're not like going through and renaming a bunch of stuff manually. It's kind of defined.
I have a feeling that that's what the drush command is meant to do, but I
Yeah.
don't know how much of the sort of lower level of renaming that it does for you.
And are we 100% sure that it's Gesso and not Gesso?
100%.
Because I feel like that's a more amusing name for a theme.
It's named after something.
Ah, all right.
Right.
Well,
so
fair
for
enough.
anybody from the fine arts world, Gesso is actually like the primer that you put on your canvas before you paint on it. So the idea being that it's like setting up your Drupal website to have all that beautiful formatting applied onto it.
Yep.
Just another instance of me being an uncultured heathen.
And if you read the module page, literally the second sentence is Gesso, pronounced Gesso.
With J-E-H in capital letters.
Yeah, correct.
To be fair, again, another example of me just being wildly unprepared. I like to take this in as somebody who's listening and not read the module page ahead of time.
No. So I want to mention one last thing too. This is the first non-admin theme that has made it as a module of the week. So you're blazing new ground again. We've only had, this is the third theme overall, Gin admin theme and Shiny admin theme, if you remember that. Were the only other two themes we've ever done.
Another thing I'd like to mention is they do have an accessibility pledge on their page as well. So that's pretty cool.
Good point.
So yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah. Very nice.
Martin, thank you again. And let's move on to our primary topic.